I don't know anybody that ever got into recovery because they just got married. You know, they had a wonderful day and, I got a raise at work and, I think I'm going to check into treatment.
There's a lot of things that, I've done in my lifetime that I regret. But I think that because of recovery, I regret them now. I have a conscience now. I have feelings now.
Welcome to Recovery Soapbox, sponsored by Brighton Recovery Center. If you like what you see in this episode, if you like what you hear, please like it, share it, and I have a feeling with our two guests that that's going to be a real possibility. We have two people who really exemplify helping others and taking it to a level that, not a lot of people get to take it to. And we have Ken Seeley and Michael Gonzales. Ken Seeley has been on the show Intervention since 1999. Global interventionist.
The show didn't start till 2004.
Didn't it? Really?
Yeah.
Well, we'll edit that out.
That was good.
Okay, so anyway.
Started doing interventions in 1999.
The show started in 2004, correct? Okay.
Or 2005, I think, is the first air.
2005, and you've been on it since it started?
Yeah.
Okay. Just had the year wrong. Devil's in the details, man. So much.
The second season I started.
And Ken's also an author. Face It and Fix It.
Yep.
Is it 3 steps to living the life you deserve?
At least.
Yeah. Michael Gonzales is also, he runs Recovery First Interventions. He has a sober living in Spokane, Washington, and he is featured on this year's Intervention on A&E, the hit show. He's the Heroin Triangle. I'm through chapter 3 on it, the 3rd episode, and the work that's going on in Atlanta. I want to get to that. So before we do that, I want to share a quick story about, I was a little nervous, as you could tell by the mistake I just made coming into this. But my brother, who passed from this, I can remember vividly when I was thinking about doing this. I can remember sitting with my brother. He'd given up his kids, and we're sitting, and we're bonging meth. And he tore up all the carpet, and there was this old wood floor that's tore up. And that angst, that cycle that he and I were in together as brothers. But I can remember the show Intervention being on. And the only way I thought that I would be able to sit down with you would have been as if I was being intervened on. And to be sitting here with you today is a victory in my recovery. I thank you for your willingness to be here. It does mean a lot to me. It means a lot to us. I was thinking about my brother. I tend to kind of get in my own head. But I'm really grateful to be on this side of recovery and to be sitting here with you. And I genuinely appreciate it. Speaking of the dark side, I'd like to talk to you a little bit first.
Why? I don't understand.
If you're willing, your story is amazing. 14 years in prison. We all have our own story. I love what you said yesterday when we were talking, but could you talk a little bit about what it was like prior to going to prison, how you got to prison?
Well, yeah, absolutely. I'm an open book. I'll talk about anything. For me, growing up, I grew up in poverty. So when I say poverty, and I tell people I grew up poor, but I don't think that hits enough on how I actually grew up. I grew up in poverty. We had 2 rooms, everybody shared. The food, we didn't know where it was coming from. If you didn't have something that you brought to the table, you weren't looked after as much by the family. And that's my family. That's where I come from. And so growing up, it wasn't your normal lifestyle. I grew up not only in poverty, but I also grew up in gangs and drugs, and at an early age. That was pretty normal in my family. My family is a lot of drinkers. They're all, they all dabble in drugs, and it wasn't a good place for me to grow up, let's put it that way. I don't know who my mother is. I have a very non-existent relationship with my father, and that's all due to drugs and alcohol. They chose to stay doing what they do, and I chose not to. I've changed my life. But growing up, the thing that I was looking for the most was that connection with somebody that, you know, we feel like there's something missing in all of us. Like in the people that are in recovery, they just feel like something's missing. And I felt like that my whole life. And growing up, you know, that's what pushed me to look for that camaraderie, and I found it in gangs. And, you know, I think the way I grew up, you know, most families, they look forward to their family members going to college. You know, that's like a big thing for the kids, going to college and doing great things. Well, in my family, it was going to prison. And, you know, it was looked upon as like a good thing. And people are, the way I grew up, people, they just can't understand that. Like, how is that a good thing? But growing up the way I grew up, where it's all about drinking and using and just not a great lifestyle, like, that's normal. And so growing up, you know, for me, it was drugs, guns, and just running and gunning and gangbanging and, you know, doing a lot of bad stuff. I'm certainly not ashamed of my past, but I'm certainly not proud of it. You know, there's a lot of things that, you know, I've done in my lifetime that I regret. But I think that because of recovery, you know, I regret them now, and I have a conscience now. I have feelings now, and the way I grew up in that lifestyle of, I mean, I could go on and on about the way I grew up, guys. Like, let's be real. That's what people want to hear, right? That's what they want to hear. But I think for me, the lining of my story is more about where I'm at now, you know, and where I've gotten and how I got here. You know, Ken, you know, whether he knows it or not, you know, he's one of my mentors. I did his training a long time ago, and I was new in this field. And, you know, to come from where I came from, which is nothing, I come from nothing, you know, and to be where I'm at right now, like, it blows me away, man. I couldn't even begin to tell you. Like, my lifestyle was just gangs, drugs, and just that was it. That was going to be my life forever, you know. And I have to pinch myself, man. It's bizarre. Like, it's the best thing that's ever happened to me. Sobriety, it changed my life, man. And all I had to do was stop doing drugs and listen, you know. And to be pulled out of that environment that I lived in. And to want to be pulled out. That's the big thing for me, is the way I grew up, you know, that camaraderie, the gang lifestyle, the prison, that's the only thing I knew. That was my love. Like, these people protected me, you know. And when I got sober, when the spiritual awakening happened for me, you know, it was good and bad, because that's the only lifestyle I knew, you know. So it was, in a sense, taking away, you know, now you got to work on being a good human being. Well, I didn't know what that looked like, and being that I basically grew up in prison, you know, it was a big learning curve for me. Like, the way I speak now, I didn't speak like this. This is not how I sound in my glorified gangbanging days.
Tell us how that was.
Yeah. Can you?
So if you guys have ever, I'm sure you guys have seen Training Day, right?
Yeah.
Everybody's seen Training Day. Well, a couple of those dudes in that movie, we have friends that know each other. So. But, you know, the way they sound in that movie, the slang, the ghetto talk is like, it's Spanglish, basically. That's how I sound.
Well, let's hear it.
Now, see, the problem is, and here's the funny thing with that. So my wife, I had took her, when I met my wife, I had took her to meet some of my family, and I hadn't been around my family in a long time. So I met up with my family, and my wife had always, she said the same thing you do. Yeah. Well, you don't sound Hispanic. You don't sound like you're Mexican at all. And so I went to introduce him to some of my family, and immediately, because I'm around my family, it kicked in. And I didn't even know it. I didn't even recognize it. I'm so far past that now, I don't recognize when I do things.
Is he not going to tell us?
I don't think so. It's not going. It's like a politician, right there.
It's like, what is going on?
It's taken so long. It's taken so long for me.
So you're not going to do it?
No, I'm not.
Oh, my God, all that, we're waiting?
And here, you know, the funny thing is I assimilate all that stuff. We're laughing about it because it's funny, you know what I mean? Like, it is funny, but when I go back into that, it sets me off. It sets triggers off on me. And I don't realize it until somebody says something to me. And it took my wife to tell me, hey, what's going on with you? And I didn't even recognize it, but that was just simply being around my family. And the old lifestyle, like nothing. It just
well,
kicked
we're in a
right.
good place if that happens. You could just check in.
I could definitely check in here.
We want to test those triggers.
I think, you know, it's funny because when I talk to people on the phone, they don't see that. And just like you want to see, like everybody wants to see me go to that place. And honestly, like we're laughing about it, but honestly, like I've worked so hard to get past that part of my life.
You don't want to see the Hulk.
Yeah,
you don't want to bring the
you know what
out.
though? It brings back a lot of. It's not just memory. It's like trauma. Like I have some significant trauma in my life, and so when I get to thinking and being in that world, it's not a good place to be, you know. And it's okay to joke about it and laugh, but that's the truth. And like that's for me. I let everybody know. Like I'm not proud of that. I'm actually quite, embarrassed of it. The way I used to act, the way I used to sound, the way I looked, the way I dressed. I'm embarrassed of it as a human being. Now that I've got recovery and I've learned what it's like to be a productive member of society. Like I'm ashamed and grossed out by that, the way I used to act, and it's embarrassing, And I don't think it does any good for anybody for me to act that out. Telling my story is huge. That helps a lot of people, but acting it out I don't think it's good, because some people look at my story and they get jazzed for the wrong reasons. Because there's a lot of bad stuff in my story. There's a lot of bad things, and people like that. Let's be honest. People like that.
And honestly, that's why I led with it. I mean, 20 felonies and 14 years in prison is a story, but I do agree. The one thing that I do want to echo back to is what you were talking about yesterday about we're all in prison when we're in addiction. Mm-hmm. That was, it really, it moved me quite a bit, and it was profound. Ken, in your early days prior to when you were still in the midst of your illness, in your book you talk about denial. Mm-hmm. And can you talk a little bit about your own denial, and then we'll talk about when you were in the midst of your addiction, and that led you obviously to writing the book.
Yeah, absolutely. I didn't go that far.
We all go different places, right? But
exactly.
that is extreme.
But you know what? That's a good point to bring up, though. Is like when I work with people early on in recovery, or I'm doing interventions and stuff, like people think that their story has to be like, well, my story. I'm not that kind of addict. I'm not that kind of alcoholic. I don't deserve. Like I don't need that. Like I'm not as bad. And that's just not the case. Like people's bottoms and people's stories. That's their bottom and that's their story. It doesn't have to be 12, 15 years in prison. It doesn't have to be all the extreme things that happen to us. It can, your story is your story, and your bottom is your bottom.
I think like that flower climbing up through the cement, though, and blooming through, like for someone, because we all go, Ken's been where he's been, I've been where I've been, and each one of us tell that story. Yeah. But there is something profoundly inspirational about being in solitary for 5 years, being in prison for 14 years, and now being sitting next to Ken Seeley and being on the show Intervention.
That's what I mean. Like I sit back and
powerful.
Like I used to watch the show. I'm incarcerated. I used to watch the show.
Not in 1999.
No. I used to watch it though. It's crazy. And back then when I had my spiritual awakening, like I didn't realize that I had the ability to help people, but watching the show, watching some of the people that I associate with, like it put me in that place where I wanted to change. Like, so thank you, obviously. I mean, you already know, I've told you thank you so many times, but it's like, you don't even know what you did when I was locked up. John doesn't even know. Like, I'm getting emotional about it.
That's good.
I don't think a lot of people know how important the work is that you guys have done and are doing for people like me. Because if it wasn't for you guys, if it wasn't for, seeing the change that goes on, like, I wouldn't have got sober, man.
Shining a light on the afflicted.
I wouldn't have gotten
the
sober.
helpers.
It's amazing.
The prison, there is no help in prison, man. So, the way you reached me, the way John reached me, like, you didn't even know it. Yeah. And I'm here because of that kind of, that work that you were doing, and I was watching it on TV, and here I am. It's bizarre. Like, you can't sit here and tell me that this isn't God.
Yeah.
You cannot, like, my story, your story, where we're at, how we met, like, you can't tell me there's no God. Give me a break.
Amen. So for you too, denial, right? Like in the midst, I'm sure you feel the same way from even all these years into it. Can you speak a little bit to it?
I got sober in 1989, and I was a crystal meth addict, and I think it was really more about like what you're talking about, just that where I was doing drugs and what I was doing. Because I wasn't in a gang is why I wasn't arrested. Mm-hmm. So it's when they talk about it's an example of your environment.
Absolutely.
That's what we mean.
Yep.
I should have been in prison. I was selling crystal meth, I was a drug addict. I was just like everyone else out there that is breaking the law, but yet I was able to get around it because of where I was doing it and what I was doing around it. So, I escaped that.
Yeah.
And so many of us escape that part of it. But because I escaped that, I think that, I'm not an addict. An addict is somebody that is in prison or that's homeless pushing a cart out in the streets.
I'm not an addict like them.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's
I'm
a
not that
real
bad.
addict.
I'm not that.
That's a real addict.
Yeah.
Not like me.
That's not really me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's what I was like, and so I couldn't see that. I was 130 pounds. I was skin and bones on crystal meth, physically, mentally dying from the drug, doing it every day for 4 years. Staying up for a week at a time. You remember that?
I do very vividly,
He's like,
very
yeah.
clearly.
He was like,
I like that,
yeah.
that day 4, when everything gets
Oh,
kind of
yeah.
molecular and
Yeah.
no, it does. Like, I can see the molecules.
Things
That's
start
all- that's
shifting.
all
Exactly.
it does, though.
It makes sense now.
Yeah.
It's real.
Let me pick up the carpet a little bit. Should we tear the carpet up? Where are we going? Let's get there fast.
Exactly. Got a lot to do today.
Yeah.
At 3 a.m.
So going through all of that, the denial was like, I'm fine. I was still working full time at a job, so I'm fine. There's nothing wrong with me. And that's what we see every day with the addict that comes into treatment or that's on the verge of going into treatment. You see it all the time. I mean, the phones ring off the hooks of people wanting help, but how many people actually make that step in going in? And the reason is because they're fine. They pull it together for another hour and, I was vulnerable for a minute, but I don't really need that help. And I sat there for years, for 4 years. I was in and out. I started going to AA. And I was like, those are for the weak people. They don't know how to party. They don't know how to control their drugs. So I went to 12 steps. That didn't work. So it was really more about, breaking that wall of denial of when I finally did go into treatment. But I had to get intervened on to go to treatment. I wouldn't have went to treatment. I was still having fun. I had a great time when I was getting high. I would have never have went if they didn't intervene on me.
And who did intervene?
My work. So my family didn't know. They were in New York and I lived in California. And I was actually working at a drug treatment center. Okay, hello, doing crystal meth in the bathroom.
Hey.
Signing people in. I was doing the billing, the accounts receivable, billing insurance,
And meth.
and doing meth in the bathroom, collecting their deductible as they came in.
Wow.
And so they were like, and back in 1989, everybody was dying of HIV and AIDS. So they were like, Ken's sick. So they kind of felt sorry for me, I think. I don't know. And then they were like, but then finally they were like, no, these lows and highs, we can't take it. So they told the owner, we're either quitting or you're getting rid of him. So they did an intervention on me on that morning to come into work. But my boss called me up and said, they're going to do an intervention on you tomorrow. Well, they didn't call it intervention. They're going to fire you tomorrow. What's going on,
Yeah.
So I was like, so I went out on ecstasy the whole night. I stayed up all night long.
Of course, because that's
Hello.
Gotta get the last shebang in. Gotta
I
do
was
it.
like, well, I'm going to go in and try to figure out how to slow down so
On
I don't have
ecstasy.
to go to work anymore.
That's the answer, right?
I don't have to go to work. I don't like going to work.
Yeah.
So I'm going to learn how to sell crystal meth and not have to go to work anymore. So I'm going to slow down because I could never, selling the drug, I could never make a profit. I was always,
Yeah.
You were using.
what's that?
You were using.
Yeah, and then you get money from it, and then you buy ecstasy or trade it with the ex dealer, or then you buy alcohol with the money, and so you're like, where's all the money and where's all the, what's left? There's nothing left. So I wasn't a very good businessman when I was a dealer.
I don't think any of
Doing
us were.
it now.
No addict is,
I
right?
don't think so. I know I wasn't. I don't know how you guys managed to stay free. Like, it blows me away.
I
I'm
think it's the
extremely lucky.
It
environment.
has to be.
I think that's what it is.
There's risks I took that were very easily would have went
Yeah.
Yeah.
years in prison
Absolutely.
for sure. I think if you hit a certain level in your addiction, you're in a car or doing something in a home where it's years,
Yeah.
and you just got caught.
Yeah.
It's
Not a very
But
good
because of
criminal.
your environment.
Yeah.
They were looking in your
Exactly.
environment. They
Yeah.
weren't looking in my environment.
that's right.
So,
And that's where, in this season's episodes of intervention, the heroin triangle. One thing I was struggling, and you and I talked about yesterday, was the shift in treatment versus incarceration there that seems to be going on. I can think of two people that's so qualified to speak to that, and whoever wants to take it first.
You go first.
The difference in in incarceration and treatment and the swing we're making, and a little bit of what that was like.
Yeah, I think about, 15 years ago maybe it's been, that they started the drug court programs because they realized that addicts and alcoholics aren't bad people, we're just sick people. And that with treatment we could get healthy. And drug court, I think they have 65% success rate. I spoke at one graduation in Brooklyn, and they're doing extremely great work on helping people get re-engaged with their families, because there's consequences.
Yeah.
Without consequences, like my consequence was I was getting fired from my job. I didn't know how I was going to pay my bills. So they have consequences in the drug court that if they don't follow that simple program, they're going to go face their felony. And they have a 65% success rate. So all addicts need consequences. And that's why I say if they're out on the streets, and because they're all breaking the law, like you said, we're just not looking for them.
Yep.
Especially the people we intervene on, they're not looking for them. But I say if they're not willing to get sober, let's throw them in jail. Because maybe they need to spend 14 years in jail and get it. I'd rather have them there getting it versus out on the streets playing Russian roulette with their life.
And other people.
Well, that too. I mean, they're affecting other people as well, and that goes back to like people say, well, I'm just a drug addict, I shouldn't be in prison, and the reality is this: is you break the law, you have to pay the consequence for that.
Yep.
I don't think that all drug users need to be thrown in prison because, I mean, if you look at the numbers, I don't know exactly what they are, but they're well above 80%, and that's the people that are incarcerated. 80 with drugs.
Are using drugs
in
prison.
In prison because of drugs. It's all related to drugs. So I think that the majority of those people need treatment. They just do.
So is 80% of the people in prison using drugs?
And using, yes.
And
the
using
majority
while
of
they're
the
in
prison are using drugs. I don't know the percentage on that.
I'm 100% on the one that I know that's in prison right now.
Yeah,
so one for one, he's using.
There's no in the prison incarceration today. There's very few places that are actually helping people.
Yeah.
And the drugs in prison are more accessible than they are on the street. It's just you can.
Wow.
It's like a supermarket for me. When I was in prison, I didn't have to go far. Like I could literally knock on my wall, send it over.
Really?
And that's how it worked. So it's just people in the real world have no idea what goes on in these places, and it can happen to anybody. Like it can happen to a lawyer going to work every day, he catches a DUI and he's going to go to prison. And the problem with that is, and there's a huge problem with it, because they turn them into criminals.
Yeah.
Okay, I could have been something different, like if I would have had the guidance, and that goes for a lot of people that end up incarcerated because of petty drug offenses.
Like if you would have gotten treatment while you were in there.
Things would be different, and that's, people are going to prison and there is nothing there. There's a couple of prisons across the country that help people, but the majority of prisons are not about rehabilitation, and they make them worse because you go into, you got to think of it this way, a guy that gets a DUI, he hurts somebody dies, they're going to throw him in with the murderers. They're going to throw him in with the real inmates. And that's not okay. That's not right. Because a person out here in the streets that's using and abusing drugs, they don't understand the world of prison. And sending them to prison does not fix anything, because people die in there. And the world is just, they have no idea. Like people are dying every day in prison, ODs, stabbings, and people that were normal folks in the real world and they just made a mistake. And they get sent to prison, and you either make it or you break it in prison. So you're either going to adapt. It's the sharks. You're swimming with sharks. You're going to make it or you're not. And that's what happens to people in society, is they go in on a charge of, oh man, I had an ounce of weed, or I had a teener of dope, and they're catching a felony for that, and they're catching serious time for it, and it's ruining families. It's wrecking families. It's wrecking neighborhoods. It is not helping.
But then they're getting used to the system.
That's right.
They're getting involved. They're
That's
getting
right.
more drugs. Now
That's
they're in
right.
the system. Now
That's
they
right.
Institutionalized.
Yep. They're getting used to that.
It's a cycle. You find families that are in this cycle, and you can go back and see the whole process of it going, the addiction in their family, whether it's getting locked up or being, like, you can just watch. You can even watch the middle class families where you would seemingly think that it's just a normal 20-year-old boy who's just doing drugs, no, but some of these 20-year-old boys, they're getting involved in gangs, and they're getting involved in drug trafficking, and that's why people they need education on this, man. I mean, sending people to prison is not the answer. Sending somebody to prison who continuously breaks the law and does not want to get better, yes, that's going to make them hit their bottom.
Give them a chance.
Absolutely.
And I think that with the show Intervention, that's what it's done since 2004, is shined a light on.
So it was 99?
Ken started Interventions in 99, Michael. Get with it. So it shines a light on that stigma, and I hope that's what this does. Because there are other solutions, and so many. I mean, some of the neighbors in this community, some of the people all over, they don't understand, and hopefully we can help that a little bit. So you were released in 2008.
I was released. I'd have to go. Let me get a look at my phone. I'll tell you exactly when.
We need to get that picture too. He has a picture of the day he was released.
I didn't see it.
Oh, you haven't seen it? I posted on Facebook before.
It's
It's pretty.
I have some good pictures, so I'll show you after that. I showed it. Very, very different. But my question to you was going to be, so what's the difference, though, Ken, in someone that, because I have friends that have been in and out of jail, and they still are going in and out of jail. I spent 3 months in jail, and I know for me what the story was, but you got released, and now you're sitting next to Ken Seeley.
It's wild, right?
Yeah, but because your list of felonies.
How did I get there?
Yeah, you were violent, you were dangerous, you were a lot of things in the midst of your illness.
Well, there's my some of my jacket.
Oh my God.
Okay, and I always tell people, people want to know, because people get tattoos and they look the part, and they always say, well,
you look the part.
Yeah, and I tell them, not only do I look the part, but I did all that. And I always tell people, here's my ADC number, look me up, because I'm an open book. I don't want. The way I look doesn't go with the way I talk. It doesn't at all. So, and that's all learned. You know what I mean? But anyway, what did you ask me?
So, in 2008 or whatever year it was when you got out, I've been bad with years so far in this podcast. But when you got out, I mean, what's the difference in you not going back?
So for me, it's really like I had a spiritual awakening when I got arrested on. Hold on. I'll tell you the day I got arrested on February 26th. February 27th is my sober date. February 26th is the day I got arrested. That's when I got sober. That's the February 26th is when I had my spiritual awakening. I had it in Prescott, Arizona. I got locked up and thrown in the jail cell where I was just at. You know what I mean? And it's an old jail. It's kind of like Shawshank Redemption, where they have those bars. Well, that's how that jail was. It's an old jail, and so I got locked up, and I was walking down the corridor, and I always go to solitary confinement. I don't. My jacket it's extensive, so I don't play well with others according to the system. So they always separate me, and so I go in, and I'm walking down the corridor, and I'm always cuffed everywhere I go. And I'm walking down the corridor, and all of a sudden you just hear the chains, because it's loud. It's the chains move the doors, so it's all old. It's just what you think of when you see Shawshank Redemption. Like, that's what it was. And I just remember walking, and I'm still high, you know what I mean? Like, I'm still messed up, but I'm walking to my cell, and I turn to the left to walk in, and I walk in the cell, and they close the door, and the chains are going, and I back up to uncuff, and on my bed, there's nothing in the room. There's not even a mattress. It's just a cot, toilet, a sink, but on the bed was a big book. And as corny as that sounds, because some people look at but that's my story.
First time I picked up a big book.
I went into that cell, and I have known about Alcoholics Anonymous and all that, and I walked in there, and it was just that moment. I had that moment of clarity, man, and it was like, I was like, man, you're here again. You just spent so much time, and I did. I had spent a lot of time in prison, and I was right there again. And at that moment, I had a spiritual awakening, and the book was there, and it was the jail style big book, the little one. And at that moment, I was okay. I had right then and there, something just, it was gone. And no matter what happened with the case that I had just caught, I had caught another felony case. I was okay with it, because I knew from that point on, I was done. Like, I had just spent a whole bunch of time, and I'm sitting here again, and I was facing a lot of time again. I was facing basically a life sentence because of my habitual offender. I'm a habitual offender because I've been in prison so much, and so I was looking at a lot of time, like a life sentence, and I was okay. Something just happened, and from that point on, my life continuously got better. Like, it just kept getting better. I went in front of the judge, and for the charges that I was charged with, everything got thrown out. The people that I was with, you know, I felt bad. They were good friends of mine in the gang, but it was their first offense, so they didn't get much trouble. So it was like a God thing, you know. All the charges on me got dismissed except one charge. And if you ever go to Arizona, don't cause any trouble in Arizona, because in the state of Arizona, being high is illegal. It's a felony. I got a Class 6 felony for being under the influence of drugs from a urine test. I gave them a urine test because they get it from you when you go. And that's what I went to prison for on my last sentence. My last prison sentence, I went to prison for being high, 2.5 years. But in that time, I mean, I had that spiritual awakening. And, you know, the unfortunate thing about prison is most prison programs, the AA is not strong. And so I delved into that book, and I did it on my own because I didn't have a sponsor. You know, I didn't understand, but I tried to do it the best I could. And I did it, and I had done the steps, and it was different. I was in prison, and I finally got to a yard, and one of my friends that I had been in there with, he's my homeboy, that's the way we talk, but like he was in there, and I had done a lot of time with him, and his name was Diablo, and in Spanish that means devil. And so we're sitting on the yard, and you get an hour of rec every day, and so we're sitting out on the yard, and he's sitting there with me, and this is a man that I've basically grown up with, you know, from prison to prison. And he just looks at me and he says, "Man, there's something different. You don't belong here anymore." Uh-huh. And that moment, like, it was hard. Like, I was sad. I was happy that somebody had told me I'd changed. You know, that was like, I was happy, but I was sad, man, because, you know, that's the only family I knew my whole life. You know, I'd spent a lot of time there, and he told me I didn't belong there anymore. And it was like, it was so good, but it was so bad at the same time. I was like, wow, maybe there is hope. But it was also like depressing at the same time, because that's the only thing I knew, you know. But I had made that decision, you know, my spiritual awakening had happened. And like they say in recovery, like, once you've made that decision, you're done. Like, this decision is made. I don't struggle. Like, I'm done.
Because you're surrendered to it, and
I'm surrendered.
Shows us.
Like, I'm
but
done.
That wave that you're talking about, that every one of us have to hit in order to get long-term recovery.
It's the
we
only
all
way.
have to do it. But that wave, that sense that comes over us, only comes through pain. That's the only way you get. I don't know anybody that ever got into recovery because they just got married.
Yeah.
You know, they had a wonderful day, and I got a raise at work, and you know, I think I'm going to check into treatment. It's the pain, and the deeper the pain is for us emotionally, the quicker we get into recovery.
Yeah, that's right.
And that wave that you have of surrender was, oh my God, not again. And then you look over and you see the book, and you see there's that glimpse of hope.
Yeah.
That's what we have to do for every addict out there, because, like, unfortunately, your brother didn't get that. You know, he didn't get to that point. But as interventionists, that's our job, is to figure out what's going to create that wave that goes through them that's going to say, I'm done. Yeah. And for every human being, it's completely different.
It's all different. I think we do the hardest job. I mean, most people aren't done when we see them, and we have to.
Hello, we
have to show them that you're done, and then we have to convince them that they're done. I think.
You got to give them the pain to have them feel that discomfort. That, you know, if you don't stop, that's okay. You could do that. Like, you had that choice. You could have looked at that book and thrown it and
continued on with my life.
Exactly. But there's something that was enough discomfort for you that said, I don't want to live this way anymore. And that's where we have to get with each individual, is finding out where their tolerance level is of pain and tapping into it in a loving, respectful way, and then giving them the opportunity to choose. You want to go this way, or you want to stay on the path you're on?
Yeah.
Which one is it?
And 9 times out of 10, they choose the right path.
They do.
I love it when we run into families, and it's always the same line. Oh, this is going to be the worst one you've ever done. You're not going to get them to go, and it's always they go, no problem. You know, it's a matter of meeting them when they're the most vulnerable. Like, that's.
And here's this is really extreme when you talk of it this way, but if your judge would have said to you, you know what, you're doing so well, I'm going to wipe away your whole record. It's all going to be gone. You may have said, even though you had that moment of clarity, you may have said, oh, I'm going to go back on that road if I'm on a clean slate.
Yeah, that's right.
But it's because of the consequences of knowing I'm going to spend my life in prison. You stayed on the right path because you knew where it was going to go if you didn't do that.
And the encouragement that you get from people that see you doing the right thing, and it's so bizarre that it happened for me in prison, but it was like the encouragement. And people need that. Like the people we intervene on, what do they hear all the time from everybody? You're a piece of shit. You're doing this wrong. You stole it. We get it. We don't need to keep beating them like that. That's not how you make somebody change, man. They already feel horrible.
Yeah, it's not about punitive. It's nothing like that. It's more about facts.
That's
like
right.
when you walked in there, it was a fact. You're going to do life, or you're going to take this path. So if we can find out what that is for them, that's going to do life, then we access that wave that's going to come over them, that's going to get them into long-term recovery. Because I mean, everybody, if you go to meetings and you listen to what it was like, what happened, and what it's like now, if you listen to the what happened, everyone talks about that wave.
It's the same thing.
It happened for them. And our job is to create that wave, and most importantly, to keep the families on board with the consequences. Because like I said, if that judge would have said, I'm wiping away all your felonies and you got a clean slate walking out the door, that's like an enabling family.
For sure.
That's saying, oh my God, you went to treatment. I'm so happy for you. You could have your car when you get out. Now that's like a judge waving away all the felonies. Because if they don't have the consistency to keep us on that road, then why would we, until we get to a point where we love our lives?
That's right.
And we say, I don't want to ever go back there. And that takes time.
And working with the family, because that oftentimes, the family all the time is sick with the prospective
It's
client.
the worst.
And so that continued
like the
family
work,
work to let them know their contribution, because of course there isn't any.
Yeah.
But that continued work, I'm sure, is something that you both do.
I consistently am always doing it. While we're doing I'm talking to a mom via text because she can't get through her head that she has to stop. Like every client, they're all the same.
Yeah.
Every family is the same. You may have those stubborn ones that just won't do anything, but they're still messing up by not showing emotion and showing support. But it's always the mother that just doesn't understand. What do you mean I don't have to pay his credit card bill? Well, you don't have to pay his credit card bill. Like, they don't get that. They're so consumed in sickness that their sickness just to them seems normal every day. And when you tell them, hey, you don't have to pay the $25,000 credit card that he ran up, it's his.
Yeah.
And the mother looks at you like, what do you mean? It's not your responsibility.
Yeah.
They believe in their heart that they have to pay that. They have to make sure. And that in itself is the hardest thing to separate. Like the family, like it's easy to identify the addict. It's easy to identify the junkie in an intervention, or the alcoholic. Like, boom, okay, you need to go to treatment. We got that figured out. It's the family.
Now what are we going to do with you?
Sabotages everything.
All the time.
Everything.
All the time.
I don't think I have ever done an intervention where the family has not, in some form or another, sabotaged it.
Yeah.
And they don't even know they're doing it. Like, they're not intentionally like trying to screw it. They just don't have any idea, and they honestly don't know. And so when you see the light turn on in the family, that's the best part for me. Is like when you get the phone call from them saying, "Hey, so and so's still using, but we're doing great."
Yeah, I just had a case that I was working on, and the family was like, yeah, we're going to go in there and we're going to have him arrested because that stuff that he stole from us. So we go in there and he goes, yeah, we're going to have you arrested. So a week later, when he's playing his games in treatment, as they always do, they're going to test the waters. That's part of the addiction. So he's playing his games in treatment, and the dad goes, the therapist says, well, weren't you going to have him arrested? Well, I've been thinking about that.
Backtracked out of it.
Boom! The kid started running the show again. Now
Winning
he's
the
out
game.
there using again because dad wouldn't stay firm. It's so simple if they just follow a simple path.
Healthy boundaries. It's critical. So 1999 to 2004, you're doing interventions. And then how did you end up on the show?
I heard they got a show picked up, and I knew that they had this concept out there, and I always thought, what a great way to educate the public, because there's so many families, and as we sit in their living room, it's kind of like the only ones that get that information are the families in there.
Yep.
And so I'm like, this could really help millions of people to see that because when I first started doing interventions, you had to spend hours explaining what an intervention was before the show. So then I was like, this would be great to get it, somewhere where people would see it. So I heard that there was a show picked up, and I don't know, I had someone that worked with us, and she said, I could get the producer's phone number. And I was like, well, how can you do that? I don't even know. I lived in LA, but I was like, okay, well, bring it in tomorrow. So she brings it in, and it was the creator, Sam Metler's phone number. And I called him up and I said, hi, you don't know me. My name's Ken. You need to interview me. I heard you have a show coming out. And he goes, who are you? Why are you calling me? And I was like, no, you need to interview me. I'm really good. He goes, well, we already got the male. We're looking for a female. And I was like, oh, God. I was like, so then a couple weeks go by and I call him up and I was like, did you find the female? Because, I think you should really interview me. And he's probably like, at this point now, stop harassing me. And he goes, okay. He goes, if it gets picked up for season 2, we'll interview you. And so a year later, in line in Philadelphia, and somebody calls me up and says, hey, are you still looking for that job? And I was like, a job? I didn't know I was looking for a job. I was like, well, okay, who is it? And he goes, it's Sam. He goes, we're interviewing for this season got picked up. So I went in, and I think they interviewed a lot of people, and I was one that was selected. So I felt honored to be a part of it.
Having just met you two, I think about that phone call. You were in prison at the time. Mm-hmm. That phone call, your persistence, that God thing, inspiring you to do it, the exchanging of the phone number. You're in prison not knowing, and then years later you would help facilitate now being on the show on Heroin Triangle. And that, like you started the podcast with saying, how can you deny God? Those are all God things.
That's absolutely a fact.
Those
are
all
God.
And
you can't plan that.
No.
Well, and how did it fall in, it's a similar story. It fell into my lap the same way.
How did it?
You're looking at him.
He
was going, I know, he was going through a tough time, and I had reached out to him because, he was going through a tough time with something. And so I reached out to him, and he had my old phone number because I had switched phone numbers. And so he was trying to get a hold of me because the show was looking to do something different and add somebody. And I didn't know, and he didn't have my phone number, but I went to do the intensive. I was going to do my trauma work with a friend of ours, Charlie, and we're sitting down at dinner, and Charlie's like, hey, man, have you talked to Ken lately? And I was like, no. I said, I've seen on Facebook, his dog passed. He's really sad. I've been trying to, give him, try to encourage him and everything. And he said, well, Ken's been trying to get a hold of you. And I was like, what? And so I texted Ken from my phone because I have his phone number. And he didn't have my new phone number. My old phone number was from Arizona, and I'd finally let it go and just stuck with my other phone because, once you have a phone number, you don't want to get rid of it. So I had it, but he had been calling that phone. And just that, I was in there taking care of me so I could keep helping people. And an opportunity dropped right in my lap.
Because you were doing what you were
doing the right thing.
That continued work
yes.
that I've hit that 4-year, 8-month mark. We were talking about it on the way up here, and I went back and I'm seeing a therapist now and doing a trauma narrative.
Yep.
You mentioned something on the write up I'd like to hear more about. You were in your recovery at 13 years.
Oh, yeah.
And can you speak a little bit to what you were talking about on the way up here?
Yeah, right before I got, my first 10 years of sobriety, I didn't work in the field. I did sober jobs for the first 10 years. And really, the reason why I didn't work or really get into a career, so to speak, is because I was in full-blown sex addiction. Or love addiction. Yeah. I just felt like, and money addiction. I was like, if I had $1 million in the bank, I would be so happy. I would be able to not have to worry about paying my bills. And oh my God, life would be so much easier. So I worked my butt off trying to make money, and it never went anywhere. It was like, I would be like, I'd make a certain amount of money and I'd spend it by the next month. And I was like, so the whole time I was trying to make money because I needed to have money in the bank for my retirement because I didn't have a state job. And my dad kind of scared me and said, you got to have a state job or a government job with a retirement. You're not going to have anything. And so I'm like, oh my God, I'm not going to have anything. I'm going to die with nothing. And so I'm panicked and I'm like, oh, I got to have $1 million. $1 million would save everything, right? So that's my mentality about working. And you're like a gerbil going in circles and you're never going to get there. Yep. You're just chasing the dollar and you're never going to get there chasing the dollar. So I was doing that. And then I was like, if I was only in a relationship, if I had the right relationship, things would be amazing. Yep. And so they do that in detox, okay? Hello. Take away one thing that feels
And they
good,
switch to
and
the
you
next.
switch to the next thing that feels good, and they're looking for their soulmate in detox. So for my first
Or treatment.
It's
or
so
treatment,
bad. Yeah.
right?
We're
Can we go
meant
to detox together?
We're meant to be together.
I was just, don't call me crazy. I was just watching that on Netflix, and somebody just met somebody in the psych ward, and I was like, oh my God, psych ward love.
It'll work out
Insane.
great.
The insanity behind that.
And I was like, and they know, I don't think it's going to work out because we're in a psych hospital.
This might be a problem.
So at least they're a little bit smarter than we were when I got sober. You know?
Yeah, we did the wrong thing all the time.
So looking for love in that first 10 years, it was like full-blown love and sex addiction. Because, I say I kissed a lot of toads to, find the right one. But I was like, just, that's all it was. I was just seeking for that companionship. Like you were saying before, it's about being with people, and that's what it was. I needed to be with someone. And so I bought a gun on the internet. But I didn't realize it had anything to do with money addiction or sex addiction. I had no clue that I was in either one of those, or love addiction. And I bought a gun on the internet because I was so depressed. And I was like, you know what? Since I was 4, I've been bullied, right? Since a little kid, I've been bullied. And since 4 years old, and now I'm like, God, 37, 40 years old, till that many years, I've been feeling less than, like a piece of crap. And so I said, you know what, God, even though I have, because I got sober at 27, so 10 years of recovery, even though I have, 10 years sober, I still don't feel good. There's something missing. And I don't want to live another 40 years like this. I don't want to live another 40. I don't want to live another 40.
I can so relate to that.
Right? I just don't want to live another 40 years like this. And I always had my family, well, it would be devastating for them if I died. And then I was like, you know what, families get over that. So I put it in my mind that I'm done, and I'm 10 years sober. 10 years sober, and I'm like, I'm going to a lot of meetings. I lived in LA, so I was going to a lot of meetings. I was sponsoring 5 guys, so it wasn't like I wasn't working my program. Everything on that, I was off drugs and alcohol, but I was depressed. And I was like, you know what? I just can't do it anymore, God. So I did a lot of prayer, meditation with, working the program. And I said, you know what, God, you can't ask me to stay on this earth for another 40 years. It's not fair. I can't do it. It's not fair. I don't feel comfortable in my own skin, and I don't want to live on this earth. I don't want to have to worry about paying my bills again next month. I don't want to have to worry about never being in a relationship. I don't want to do it, God. And so I said, I went online. That's when AOL was big. I was in my
The modem noise.
Signing in. They were big. So good. People know about that one. And so I signed on, and I found a gun. And I said to God, I said, you know what? If that gun comes before I could find help, because in AA it teaches some people need outside help. And I've been in therapy the whole 10 years. So I said, I need to find somebody to help me with this, but if I don't, then that's a sign that, God, you're telling me it's okay, that I could kill myself. And so I went out and I interviewed like 5 therapists, and I was looking for therapists, and I had no money for a therapist. I had no life or health insurance. So I'm like, it was really rough. Like, how do you find it? I wasn't HIV positive, so I couldn't go to the center to get free therapy. So I was like, where am I going to get therapy at? So I just went online, I found all these places, and then, like you said, God, this guy's hitting on me online, I think, I don't know, but he's like talking to me in one of the chat rooms, and I was like, he goes, what do you do? And I said, what do you do? He goes, I'm a therapist, I'm a doctor. And I was like, I was just about a gun. And I was like, I was going to kill myself. And he goes, get in my office tomorrow. I was like, I don't have any money. He was like, just get in my office. So I went in there, and he's the one that taught me how to meditate.
That's awesome.
He taught me how to really meditate. And if he would have told me it was about meditation, I would have ran. I would have been like, you're crazy. But he gently introduced to me the power of meditation to get comfortable in my own skin. And then he was like, you're going to go celibate one day. And I was like, me, celibate? Hello? Are you on drugs?
What's wrong with you?
Something's not right
crazy.
with this guy. And 2 months later, I got dumped on my 40th birthday. And I was like, I'm done. I'm going celibate.
40's hard enough as it is.
Okay.
It is one. Yeah.
40.
You guys aren't giving me any hope, man, at all.
40.
Thanks.
Maybe you'll tell a different story for me. 40 was hard.
That's what I'm looking forward to. It's going to be a great year. Don't worry.
Great year.
So he really helped me with the meditation to get comfortable with where I'm at. So I had to get comfortable where I was at financially and say, you know what, I don't need $1 million. I could live in my little cute apartment the rest of my life and be comfortable. You know, it was rent control, LA. It was really cute 2-bedroom.
Do those two things go together? Rent control in LA?
West Hollywood, yeah.
Yeah, West Hollywood. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I was like, I could live here the rest of my life and I could get a job making $10 an hour. And so I surrendered that wave that you're talking about, surrendering over,
Yep.
you know, your addiction. That wave went over like, I don't need to make a lot of money. I don't need that in my life. And I let go of it. And then I went celibate and I said, I'm done. I'm done dating. I'm done doing all of that. And all of a sudden I got comfortable in here. And that's when I went to work for a treatment center and I started answering phones and learned about interventions. You know, I didn't even know about interventions back
God
then.
moments. Again, God moments.
Exactly.
Completely.
It's like, how does that happen? You know, it's like,
Left up to us, these things do not happen. So,
So yeah, when it was left up to him, he's buying a gun.
yeah.
yes,
He surrenders it to God, and he ends up at a treatment center.
yes. And answering phones at $10 an hour because now I'm okay with making
Yeah.
$10 an hour. I'm like, I'm comfortable doing that. And so when I surrendered it, then all of a sudden a career popped up that I couldn't even imagine because all I wanted to do was help people.
That's how
That's
it works.
amazing.
I
That's
just wanted
exactly
to help
how it
people,
works.
right? I was like, if I got out of this drug addiction and I got out of this depression, there's other people could get out of it, and I
right.
want to help them get out of it. And that's the only reason why I started the business. So it wasn't about money; it was about you always hear it in all those, you know, those tapes that people talk about how to be successful. But even if you're serving coffee at Starbucks, if you're doing it to give the customer the best experience, then you're going to be happy at what you do.
That's right.
But if you're doing it for the paycheck, the customer's not going to be happy and you're not going to be happy.
That's right.
And I lived doing it for the paycheck. And I stopped doing it for the paycheck and I started doing it to help the families. And I remember, when I was doing one of my first interventions and, this woman had me stay there because she was not, willing to raise the bar with her son. So she had me stay there for 10 days. Oh, just go back. He'll talk to you. And I was smoking pot every day, getting high. And I was like, he'll talk to me, but he's not going to go unless if you change. Just stay. And so when I left, I think my fee was $3,500 and she gave me 18 grand. And I was like, oh my God, I never had a check like that in my life. I was like, I could work a year for that. But I wasn't doing it for
That's right.
the money. I
And
was
then the
doing
money
it to
came.
save her
Yeah.
son's life.
So amazing. God moments. That's what it is.
I mean, I love the part that you said about prayer and meditation, like the meditation. We were talking about meditation yesterday, man. If it wasn't for meditation, I wouldn't be here. I can guarantee you that. I would not be here because, I spent 5 years in the hole, for being a great inmate that I was. And
5 years in the
5
hole.
years. I was in one cell for almost 14 months. I never even left the cell. So if
So where did you shower?
just take a bird bath in the.
No.
So there's a story that goes with that. So it's always
Just
a story.
take a bird bath. he
So
says.
like that it's hard to it's the meditation that I did, man. I learned it from the bosses in prison. Like that's for people that are in prison that are going to be doing a lot of whole time, a lot of shoe time, and you're a part of this organization. They try to teach you things so you don't go crazy.
Yeah.
And that's why I'm so connected with them because, they helped me too. And he taught me how to meditate. And, every day that was my routine. I was telling Josh yesterday, my routine was I'd get up in the morning, I'd clean my cell, I'd have my coffee, my little coffee packet that they give you. And, you start your day and I do my prayers and everything. And then I would go to the front of my cell and start exercising. But part of my routine was I would meditate. I would run in place and I would start to meditate. And I would take myself back to where I was a younger kid playing in the neighborhood or work, good memories.
Yeah.
And I would meditate that. And I told him yesterday, if it wasn't for meditation, I wouldn't be here.
Wow.
Because, sitting in a cell, I was in a cell for 14 months. I'd never even left the cell because, you know, where I was at is just as a nightmare. There's crazy people. There's animals. There's just really violent people. But you get treated like an animal too. So you go to the shower. Everywhere you go, you're cuffed. Behind your back, you're cuffed. So you go to the shower. Well, you're left in there for 6 to 8 hours, or the next shift comes on and takes you out of the shower. So I didn't take showers. I just took a bird bath in my sink because I had went and got in the shower one time and I was there for 8 hours. And then my neighbor, I got the great pleasure, which it's not, but you know, that's what the cops thought. I got the great pleasure of listening to my neighbor kill himself. And that happened twice. One time in the shower, one of my neighbors killed himself, and then one time he just killed himself. And it's like, that was around me constantly. And if I didn't have that I wouldn't be sitting here.
Yeah.
Like there's no like if, ands, or buts about it, guys. I would not be sitting here, you know. And so
You go crazy.
Yeah, when people tell me like, oh, I can't meditate, I'm just like, you're not trying.
Yeah.
Because I was able to do it in the most disgusting, horrible place, and all I had to do was surrender and try it, and it changed my life.
And it's not easy
No.
to meditate. It's hard.
No, it's hard.
I got up this morning and did my meditation, and I was like, oh, just roll over and go to bed. You don't want to get up and do that early.
But the relief that comes from it,
Oh, the gifts.
Jesus, I mean, it's insane.
That, for me, what meditation has done is things that tend to come more easily. For instance, whether it's, you know, I focus on something, I think about something, and it seems like if I'm not meditating, and things just happen for me in a way that those God moments, those things, everything feels
So naturally.
Maybe we're just more aware of it. And even you think of talking about God moments, Bill W. knew to write it in, and a lot of the word that gets missed in that 11th step is through prayer and meditation.
That's right.
That meditation piece, he knew. It doesn't say just through prayer, it says through meditation. For you guys, is it just mindfulness and you're focused on your breathing, or is it transcendental, or is it?
I mean, for me, I focus a lot on breathing, but it's just something that clicks on with me. I don't have this process. Like, I go into my mind and I just calm myself down, and the breathing obviously helps, but it turns on and I'm there. It's taken me a long time to get to that point. Like, it wasn't easy to get to that.
No, I'm still working on it.
Yeah,
There's times
like,
when I can only
takes
do like
time.
7
and
minutes.
there's
I try to do
times where
20, and I'm just
I
like,
can't
okay,
meditate at all. Yeah, like
Yeah.
there's times where I can't meditate at all because this thing up here is just, it won't stop. So,
Yeah.
But I'm telling you, like, that's the missing component for almost everybody. Like, we go to meetings and everybody is, you know, they're talking about recovery's going great, everything's going, but I just feel like shit. Like, why do I feel like shit? Like, well, there you go.
They're not meditating.
That's right.
That's why I bought the gun.
That's right.
Because I wasn't meditating. And, you know, for me, the guy had me doing, you know, he had me meditating to Ganesha, which is
A chant.
a Ganesha, you know, who is like an obstacle, a god of removes obstacles. He has 4 hands, so he removes obstacles. So I would just sit there and say, you know, whatever was in my day, God, please remove the obstacles and make it as easy as possible. And I would just sit there and ask Ganesha to do that. And I didn't even know what Ganesha was. I had no idea. You know, I just said, okay, there's a little elephant guy. I was like, you know, just move him. Ganesha, got him out of the way. And, you know, and as the years went on, you know, I just realized with the chakras and all of that, there's the energy from the back behind us that we all have, and you pull it up through you. And I would push the energy up through me, and that's when I really connect to God. You could push that energy from your gut all the way up to your head, and that's when, you know, I'm really like in the zone when that happens.
How many years did it take you to get to that?
10.
It's got another 8 years to go.
5
I've only
years
been
straight.
meditating a couple years.
Nobody told me about it, though. Maybe if you look for it, maybe you'll find it, because I didn't know.
Have either of you tried sensory deprivation?
I have.
It's like forced meditation,
Yeah.
right? That kind of helped me with my other meditation when I did that several times. It's to be in there, and it seemed to just get me there mentally.
It clears
quicker.
things out. It's an odd. I can't explain sensory deprivation either, but it puts me in this. It's weird.
Do you do it often, or?
I do it every chance I can get. When I visit treatment centers, or I have a treatment center in Washington, they have it, and they let me use it whenever I want. So it's good to have those kind of
So
relationships.
you've done it as well?
Yeah.
I don't know what that is.
But that's a good one to get to for the newcomers, because it gives you other things to look at to get to that place.
Yeah.
Instead of just trying to figure out how to get there on your own, because that's the hardest part. And then why? But I think it's really important for people to know also is everything that we have that is gifts to us is because we sacrifice. You know, like I look at it like our meetings, you know, we go to 12-step meetings and we, you know, I don't go there to stay sober anymore per se, but I go there now because of the group and, you know, and working with people and hearing, you know, it helps me and I help people, but I hear things from newcomers that comes out of their mouths that is helpful to me. But the reality is that you have to sacrifice and go to these meetings. You know, I don't like going to them. I don't like to say, oh, I got to have a home group and I got to work with a. I don't like that. You think I like doing that? That's not something I would choose to have to do. But yet, because I sacrifice that, I get to live drug and alcohol clean. Because I sacrifice time to spend meditating, I get to have that connection where something that happens, I know which way to move. My intuition tells me which way to move. Yeah. And, you know, I look at it the same way with my eating disorder, because now I'm dealing with an eating disorder. And, you know, I have to sacrifice what I'm eating and exercise and all that stuff to get the results I want. You know, so you know, for everything in life,
that's right,
you have to sacrifice to get the bigger picture. You know, it'd be easier for me to just sit there and eat myself to death. You know, I'd love that. It'd be fun. Hello. Yeah. Or maybe I'll eat myself to death and do a little meth to
counterbalance it.
There you go.
There's your balance.
We tried so often.
Oh, this is heaven. But then there's no sacrifice. I'm just doing self-will. But to go to the meetings and go to the gym and watch what I'm eating, there's sacrifice in that. And that's where you get in touch with who you really are. And when you get in touch with who you really are, you connect with God. And now I'm so grateful I didn't kill myself, because now I don't want to die. You know, now I'm okay with living the next 40 years of my life. And I'm like, oh, maybe it'll be 50. You know, that'd be even more interesting to see what happens in the next 50 years. So now I'm kind of, I don't think I'll ever be excited about it, but I feel like, you know, at least I'm not dreading it.
Yeah.
Kind of like, oh, this is gonna be interesting. This will be a fun ride. Like when John Southworth died, you know, the last thing he said to me is, he goes, "It's been a fun ride. It's been a fun ride. You know, it's been a fun ride," when he knew he was going. And so, it's a fun ride.
It is.
When you're sober.